Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode. I'm Jackie, and I'm excited to share with you a slightly different topic today. You know me, I love talking about cultural and societal topics to help you improve your English vocabulary. But today, we are focusing on English usage itself and looking at the question, why do English speakers not always say what they mean? Because I'm going to focus on how the language is used, I won't stop to explain idioms like normal, but as always, you can access the free annotated transcript on my website, jackieteachesenglish.com, where I have the chance to explain all that good stuff in more detail. So without further ado, let's dive in. If you already speak English at a confident level, you have probably noticed something interesting. People don't always say what they mean, or at least not in the way you might expect. You might hear things that sound vague, indirect, even wishy-washy, and even though you understand every word, the meaning still feels unclear. And at this level, this can feel really frustrating. You're not missing vocabulary. It's definitely not an issue with your grammar. You're listening very carefully, and yet, something still doesn't quite land. I want to take a moment to reassure you, though. This usually starts happening after your English becomes good. It's not a beginner problem, or even really an intermediate problem. This is something that you begin to notice when you're already fluent enough to follow the conversation, but not quite sure how to interpret everything that is happening underneath the surface. In this episode, I want to slow that down a little. I don't want to give you a list of phrases or teach you rules, but I want to explore with you why English often sounds this way and what role indirectness is playing in a conversation. Because most of the time, this isn't about a lack of certainty or confidence at all. It's about something else, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. You know the sorts of things I'm talking about. You might be receiving feedback on a presentation at work and hear from your colleague, maybe it could be worth changing the opening slide. I'm not sure it completely captures your objectives. Or perhaps you're sitting in a room and your friend says, "It's chilly in here, isn't it?" Gently prompting you to close the window without needing to ask directly. When people notice this sort of thing for the first time, it's easy to assume that something is missing, that the speaker is being unclear, or avoiding a decision, or maybe even unsure about what they want to say or even what they think. And of course, sometimes that is true, but very often that is actually not what is happening at all. For native speakers, being exact in what we say can feel very heavy. It can feel abrupt, aggressive, and very final, like a door closing on the conversation, even if that isn't the intention at all. So instead, English speakers often use a kind of softness, not to hide meaning or lie, but to keep the conversation open and friendly. By speaking in this way, we leave space for a response, disagreement, or compromise. This is why you will often hear things that sound slightly unfinished or unsure. This isn't because the speaker doesn't know what he or she thinks, quite the opposite, but they are intentionally making room in the conversation for the other person, inviting them in. And once you start listening for that, you'll see that this isn't about confusion. This is a social choice, and it goes deeper than just at a linguistic level. Let me give you a very ordinary example. Let's imagine you are in a meeting or maybe just talking to someone after work, and you make a clear suggestion. Nothing groundbreaking, just a practical idea. The response you could get might be something like, "Yeah, that could be interesting," or, "We might want to think about that." Now, you might walk away from that conversation, scratching your head and feeling a little confused. On the surface, those responses feel very vague. You might be wondering, do they like the idea or not? Is that a yes or is that a no? And if you are used to more direct communication in your native language, this can feel deeply unsatisfying. But these aren't moments of uncertainty. It's caution. Your colleague is trying to leave space. They don't want to close the conversation too quickly. If they say, "No way, that's a bad idea," or "Yep, I agree," then the conversation feels final. They are allowing you or another person in the conversation to move forward and continue exploring the topic without pressure. So, this isn't about the exact words that they're using, this is about the function they are serving. These aren't answers, they are invitations. Let me give you another example, and this one actually comes from one of my lessons with a student of mine. My student had lost a list of vocabulary I had sent her the week before. She wanted me to send it to her again. Very simple request. However, this is how she phrased it. She said, "I need you to send me the vocabulary again." All of what she was saying was true and completely reasonable, and I'm sure that in her native language, this kind of direct request is perfectly natural and wouldn't raise any eyebrows. And yet, for me, as a native English speaker, a little alarm bell went off in my head. I sat up straighter, I was on alert. The immediate sensation was that I had done something wrong and was being chastised. Of course, this was not my student's intention, but social miscommunication had occurred. So we talked about why that direct speech doesn't work in English like it would in her language. We explored other alternatives that she could say instead. "Would you be able to send me the vocabulary again?" Or, "If you have time, would you mind sending it to me again?" In both of these examples, there is an invitation for the conversation to continue. Of course, my answer was always going to be yes. Obviously, I didn't mind sending her the words again. No drama whatsoever. But in English, we appreciate that softness and openness that this indirect language provides. What this example also demonstrates is that along with the desire to keep the conversation open, English-speaking cultures also respect personal autonomy. A high value is placed on personal choice and not imposing on others. For example, a friend of yours is in the process of moving house, and they want to ask you for a favor. You might hear something like, "If you have time, it would be nice if you could help me move in, but no worries if you can't." They could be clearer. They could say, "I want you to help me move in, please." But that closes the conversation and forces you to say yes or no. By using a more indirect and vague, "that would be amazing, only if you have the time, but don't worry if not," language, they are inviting the other person to say no without either of you losing face or feeling embarrassed. This language isn't wishy-washy. Your friend would like the help, but they are offering you the space and opportunity to say no without feeling obliged and awkward. Does this mean that English speakers never use direct language? Of course not. And I'm sure you've heard examples of very direct and strong language in your life and in films and TV shows. But I want to point out that that is an intentional choice. If your boss says to you, "I need that report on my desk by the end of the day," well, you know that she is not messing around. You may even get the sense that you are in her bad books. She's angry at you, perhaps because you're running late on the assignment. All you know is that she is absolutely serious about it and is willing to sound direct and, quite frankly, aggressive because she feels like she needs to in that situation. What I'm saying is that it all depends on the context, our relationship with the person we are speaking to, and how high the stakes are. By understanding these nuances and experimenting with direct and indirect ways of saying the same thing, you can unlock an entirely different toolkit in English. It's exciting. But when you are in that conversation and you feel a little lost as to what is actually going on, it can also be quite frustrating. So if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, there is something important I want to tell you. Noticing this kind of indirectness, or even being confused by it, is not a sign that your English isn't good enough. It's actually the opposite. You're at the advanced stage where you can turn your attention away from what is being said, and you can notice how it's being said and what that does to the conversation. And that is a very different skill. This stage can sometimes feel a little uncomfortable. You understand more than you ever have before, and yet you sometimes feel you don't have a complete grasp on the meaning. This does not mean you're behind. This means you are starting to listen closely. So if you start noticing this kind of indirectness more often now, in conversations, in emails, meetings at work, try to not see it as something you're failing to understand or getting wrong. Reframe it and tell yourself that you're hearing English more clearly than ever before. A lot of what happens at this level isn't about learning new language, but it is about learning how to interpret the language you already know and start to read in between the lines. You can pay attention to what is being said and to also what is not being said, and that's a skill often reserved for advanced learners. I'm going to circle back to this idea in future episodes, discussing these invisible rules of English from different angles and giving you the secret code you need to decipher interactions confidently and use these same techniques to refine your tone and clarity when speaking. And if you ever want to talk through these kinds of questions more personally, I also work one-to-one with advanced learners on these kinds of nuances of the language, especially around tone, clarity, and how your English comes across. You'll find details in the description, along with how to access the free annotated transcript for this episode. And as always, if you liked this episode and you feel like it has helped you, please consider giving it 5 stars on your podcast app. This really helps me increase my visibility and reach more English learners like yourself. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye!